He is. They announced it today, a 5-year contract, which the details will come out here at some point soon. But a 5-year deal for a guy who has had six, I originally thought it was five, 6 years at Holy Cross, has done really well in those 6 years, especially recently. Coached at some lower levels before that, was successful. So he's been at three different colleges. Two of the three had scholarships, one of them FCS, one at every place. So the questions you have, right, are recruiting areas that aren't the Northeast, and then if he can win at the FBS level. But based on his track record, he fits the mold of what Jeff Bourne wants in a head coach, very Mike Houston, Curt Cignetti-esque, in the sense that he's won at places that maybe don't have a ton of resources at lower levels. And he's just like super positive, really good coach. Everyone in the coaching industry sort of thinks he's a rising star. It's hard to come away from this hiring cycle thinking it's anything less than a home run.
I mean, he's coached for 14 years now in total. He's gone to the postseason in 9 of those years. You could argue 10 because this year they got left out of the FCS playoffs despite having a pretty good record and a pretty good resume overall. So the guy can coach. The guy knows what he's doing. I think this is a home run hire. I think they knocked it out of the park. I think this went into the parking lot and took out a car. It was such a good hit. Like, this is fantastic, right? Like, am I crazy for thinking that this is the best hire that JMU could have done at this point? Like, this is better than Manny Diaz. This is better than Dana Holgerson, who was getting floated around. Am I crazy for thinking that they got their number one guy?
I think it's probably their number one choice. I think we wrote and sort of posted on the podcast last week, and then wrote sort of the home run hires. The three I added Manny Diaz. The first two were Bob Chesney and Joe Harrisonburg, who reportedly were like two very strong candidates. So I don't think the coaching search had really any surprises, maybe some poor flight tracking, but no surprises really. And the two guys I think that were toward the end there, Harrisonburg and Chesney, both great options. Chesney has significantly more head coaching experience than Harrisonburg, so he probably makes sense as the number one choice, and I think he was.
Yeah, and now a lot of people Eastern virtual orientation saying let's get the athletic director at Holy Cross too. There's been a little bit of rumblings of that I believe his name's Kit Hughes
Yeah.
has been floated as a potential athletic director hire. And there was some kind of discussion about him potentially. That's the reason the holdup was here, was that they were trying to get both of them and announcing them together. That wasn't the holdup as evidenced by signing him to a 5-year deal. But I think there might be some backroom stuff going on with it. I have no idea, though. If it's a hire, then it's a good hire. If it's not, I don't know anything about athletic directors.
Can I rant for a quick second here on some of this
Please,
stuff?
please, you hardly ever rant. Please rant.
When an athletic department goes to find a head football coach, they're going to find a head football coach, right? So there was a lot of stuff on the internet about like, oh, they've locked up Chesney, and now Jeff Bourne, Cliff Wood, Roger Sankson, and Dimitri Holloway are looking for coordinators for Bob Chesney. That's just not how it works. Bob Chesney's going to hire his own staff. So the chance that they were flying private jets to various spots in the country to recruit coordinators, highly unlikely. It would be super unusual and a bit alarming, to be honest. I don't want my athletic director involved in a head coach. I want him involved in the head coaching search. I don't want him then like working to hire coordinators. That's not their job, and something that I don't think Jeff Bourne would sort of overstep his role there. I also don't think, given how important a head football coach is to a university, especially one like JMU that's just in the FBS and sort of climbing the ranks, right? You're not going to be like, this hire for athletic director that we wanted in the spring. What if we just put that with this other really important hire and try to do that in 6 days? No, you're not going to do that. That doesn't make any sense timing wise. You're going to stick to your original timeline. Also, and probably most importantly, they should be separate. There's all this stuff floating around of like this head coach and this athletic director would work really well as a pair. Bob Chesney could be gone in a year. He's that good a coach. He could be at a Power 5 school in a year. So you're going to hire an athletic director to pair with him, even though Chesney might not be there long term. That doesn't make sense. So what you want to do is you want to hire a very good athletic director who can work with multiple coaches, because it's also important that like football is not the only sport. So when they hire an athletic director, it's going to be somebody who can work with every coach at the school, who can, yes, get along with the football coach, but get along with everyone, fundraise well. That's a huge hire. They're not going to sort of put those together in the same spot, if that makes sense. So they were going for the head football coach. That was their hiring process. I believe all flights were related to that. I don't think they're going after coordinators. Can't imagine they were also doing AD stuff, especially if that would change the timeline at all, right? Because it's very important to do this quickly given the transfer portal and the recruiting class. So I was just surprised when people were like, he's obviously doing all these other hires. Like, no, I think Jeff Bourne was trying to get head football.
Yeah, I think the head football coach was the only thing they were doing. I think the Indianapolis flight yesterday, and we can kind of dive into the cert, everything there. Like the Indy flight was very weird because everyone was thinking that was the layover spot for Chesney after he had gone out to Vegas to celebrate one of his players who was having an award given to him, I believe Scholar Athlete of the Year. And Chesney had gone out, so everyone had thought that they were flying to meet him in Indy and then fly him back or have that a second final interview, whatever it may be. That could have been the case, but probably wasn't the case because I scrolled it and they flew into Indy, which is an international airport. So I was sitting there scrolling through everything that had been going in and out of Indianapolis that day. There was no flight in from Vegas, commercial or private. The only flight in from Vegas was a FedEx cargo flight. And I don't think that Bob Chesney was on a FedEx cargo flight coming in from Vegas. So I really don't know what the Indianapolis stop was. The Indianapolis flight yesterday was for. But it doesn't matter. They got their coach, Bob Chesney. He is a damn good coach. He's a winner. He's won at the Division III, Division II, at the FCS levels. He's won at places historically that don't win. And I think that's something that's really big. And it's something that Bourne has targeted a lot in these searches. Cignetti won at places that historically had not won, at Elon, at IUP, at the Division II, at the Division I level. And now you're targeting Bob Chesney, who has won at, I might be mispronouncing this, Salve Regina or Salve Regina, a Division III school. Then he went to Assumption, which was also in Worcester, Massachusetts. They weren't historically winners. He got there and he won a lot and he won often. And now they're at the FCS level with a Holy Cross team that historically is not great. And he turned them into perennial Patriot League. I mean, you could say contenders, but it was more like Patriot League dominators.
Yeah, and he spent like a decade in Worcester, so he's been there for a really long time in Massachusetts. So to pull him from the Northeast,
which
to
is
Harrisonburg
new to Bourne, which he's never hired out of the Northeast. Withers was out of the South at UNC, came from UNC. Houston came from the Citadel, and Cignetti came from Elon. All like in this general recruiting area. This is the first time they've gone Northeast for a big hire that I can remember.
They like their coach. They like their guy in Bob Chesney. I know there are some questions about like recruiting. If you look through Holy Cross's roster, they do have a nice blend of guys. I think they have 12 players from Florida. Their leading receiver this year, who's one of their best players on offense, is from Virginia. Leading tackler, I think, was Michigan. And we'll talk about him in a little bit. And then they also had a defensive lineman, one of their best players from Ohio. I believe I have that correct and didn't switch them. But they've got good players on that roster. And I also think that like he's very personable based on all the interviews I've seen of him and things like that. I don't think it's gonna be hard for him to adjust to a new region. Like he just seems like a nice guy who is very passionate. So that'll typically work pretty well, especially given this fact that it's not like JMU's coming off a bunch of down years where you have to like sell the school. Like they had 26,000 people on the quad for college game day and are ranked in the top 25 and are 11-1. Like kids in Virginia know what they're doing. Like they know what JMU is. I think North Carolina kids are probably familiar as well at this point. So it's not that hard, I don't think, for him to move to a different region and get some really talented players into Harrisonburg.
Yeah, and he gets really talented players to a Holy Cross school that historically does not necessarily have the most talented players. Not trying to throw Holy Cross under the bus, but Patriot League not necessarily known for being kind of an upper echelon talent league. But he's turned Holy Cross with some really good players into a really, really solid team. We'll talk about some of the transfers that they've had hit the portal, but their quarterback, Matthew Sluka, is going to get the bag at maybe it's JMU, maybe it's somewhere else, but he has a long list of potential suitors after he entered the transfer portal. You got to imagine that he's going to be an impact type of player at the FBS level next year. Their leading tackler, I won't spoil the surprise with what you think about him later on in this podcast, but he's made Holy Cross into a team that since Chesney took over in 2018, the offense has finished on average as the 1.8 best scoring offense, and their defense 2.6. That's their average kind of end of season where they finish in terms of scoring offense and defense. An upper echelon team. And it's a defense that in 2021 had the best defense in all of the FCS. And it's an offense that this past year, they were the third best rushing offense in the FCS, fourth best in total offense, seventh in pass yards per completion, seventh in scoring. And they were the second best offense in the entire nation in third down conversion. They converted third downs at a 52% clip. That's nearly 20 points higher than what JMU did this last season.
He's also got a reputation for like really coaching up special teams in an impressive way, which is kind of exciting.
That's how he started his career.
For JMU, that's kind of been up and down the last few years too, right? So that's an interesting guy to bring on. He's a great leader, right? And I know that's sort of cliche sometimes, but he seems like people gravitate towards him. And a point that I want to make, that no shade to JMU. Holy Cross is like a big time academic institution. It like recruiting there, it's a very specific type of player you're able to get, where it's like the grades have to be very good. You also want them to be very good at football, where again, JMU, good academic school. There's a little more leeway there with some recruits, where like they don't need to have like a 3.8 GPA in high school for you to get them to on your roster.
I'll say at Holy Cross, they are student athletes. They come for school and football. I would say sometimes JMU not necessarily recruiting for kids to come play school.
There's a little bit more football probably there, right? So he's going to be a fun hire because he still, I think, values that stuff and is going to want them to like have discipline and thrive in the classroom. But when it comes to recruiting, things are a little bit more open for him now. I got a question for you.
Okay.
So I guess a week ago, did they still have? When did Cignetti officially leave? Was it a week ago?
6 days ago. Or maybe a week ago. Yeah.
So let's go back, 10 days.
Okay.
Curt Cignetti's still the coach. You fast forward, Bob Chesney's the coach. Which do you prefer? Do you prefer Bob Chesney Dukes or Curt Cignetti Dukes?
I think it's tough because the reporting that Ben is doing, our recruiting guy who has his kind of his hand on the fingers on the pulse. That's what the saying is. Fingers on the pulse of recruiting and kind of what the portal is looking like. Recruiting, I don't think it changes too much. He says a lot of the guys are going to stay committed. It may be a little difficult to potentially get the decommitted guys back on board, but there's still a chance to get the decommitted guys back on board. And he's reporting that the transfer portal, 99% of these guys, maybe a little less, we're going to enter the portal anyway. And you kind of look at who's in the portal, right? It's Aiden Fisher, who's going to be a dog. He's going to get a P5 offer. He's going to get a bag. Jalen Walker is going to get a bag. Taurus Jones going to get a bag. And not to tap ourselves on the back, but we had a 3-ish question, like our 3 headlines going into the 2023 JMU football season. Bennett said all 3 linebackers are going to be in the transfer portal: Aiden Fisher, Taurus Jones, Jalen Walker. Well, that happened. James Carpenter probably going to get some P5 bag looks. Who am I?
Zach Horton's already got P5 offers.
Zach Horton's going to get
McLeod, right? McLeod's got a chance to.
McLeod's probably the only guy that would have stayed if Cignetti and Sinceri stayed. Maybe Zach Horton stays, maybe James Carpenter stays, but you don't really know. So if we're talking from a pure coaching standpoint, and everything else, I throw everything else out. This is in a vacuum. This is only coaching, right? This is what the question. I think not looking ahead either, right? It's right here, right now. I think it's Chesney.
Dude, his ceiling's so much higher, right?
But we're gonna be looking for a new coach in 2 years.
I know. I like it. I would have been fine if Cignetti stayed another decade, to be honest with you, and retired. Like I would have been so pleased with that.
That's what I'm saying. Like in a vacuum, right here, right now, it's Chesney. But like when you take everything else into consideration, like if Cignetti didn't get a job and he stayed around for 10 more years, I would have rather had that than Chesney, who's going to, but hopefully he doesn't. But
I will just say there are very few names that were realistic that they could have hired where I would have been like, you can convince me it's an upgrade. Bob Chesney is one of the few names.
Yes. Yeah.
That's exciting.
Nova said in the YouTube comment section, if you're watching on YouTube, Facebook, or Twitter, let us know what you guys are thinking about the hire in our comment section in the replies But Nova said he loves that he keeps the foot on the gas. No more inside zone 3 times to run out the clock. No more Cignetti turtling. That's a great segue into what his style of play is, how he goes about attacking opponents' defenses, and how his defenses typically play. If you want to start this one off.
Bit of a dog, I would say.
Dog.
I like him. I like him. So they're fairly aggressive, I would say, with most things. You can go and watch. They played South Dakota State. I can't remember if it was last year. It was last year in the playoffs.
Dog.
They end up losing by 21, but they were
a dog.
It was tied 21-21 like in the fourth quarter, and they just kind of unraveled late. One of their touchdowns, it's like I think it was 4th and 1 or 3rd and 1. They hand it to the running back in this like jumbo set. The running back stops like a yard short of the line of scrimmage, jumps and throws a pass to a wide open dude for a touchdown. And I was like, whoa. Like they just ran some stuff that was like, oh, they're a little bit insane. Like they're very aggressive. They're clearly scheming some stuff up, knowing that like, hey, like maybe South Dakota State's a little more talented than us. If he keeps that same mentality, I think they're going to be a lot of fun. They have a guy in the portal we'll talk about in a little bit who has
keep teasing this guy.
This is someone else.
Oh,
this is he has 6 blocked punts in 4 seasons. He had 3 blocked punts last year. Like the stuff they do on special teams, unbelievable. So I like that stuff a lot. Their offense was, I've seen some people call it like pro style. They do some stuff under center, do some shotgun. I think they list it probably more as like a traditional spread, maybe like a pro spread. It's unique in the sense that like their quarterback runs the ball, Sluka, an absurd amount.
He has 200 more career rush attempts than pass attempts, and he nearly had as many rush yards this season as passing yards.
It makes it kind of hard to define like what they're running because like they'll set up and run like a lot of quarterback power, like out of the shotgun, that kind of stuff. He also loves to scramble where if like the first read's not there, he's like, okay. And he'll tuck it real quick.
All right. I guess.
Yeah. If I have to run it, he does not slide. He's never attempted to slide, I don't believe. It seems like he would rather like get concussed than slide with the way he runs. So unique offense where like if they don't have Sluka, I think it probably looks a little bit different. And then defensively, I think they list themselves as a 4-2-5. I've seen some Holy Cross people describe them as like a 4-3, but I would expect them to kind of do the 4 defensive linemen, 2 or 3 linebackers, bunch of defensive backs. Doesn't seem like it'd be drastically different from like a pure setup to what they're doing now. So I think some of the players that are on the roster would certainly fit with it. But he also seems like someone I think that would probably adjust based on personnel. So that's sort of what they did at Holy Cross, but I think they're willing to alter things based on who's on the roster.
But if you're running a 4-2-5, at least defensively, I imagine there's not a lot of change happening there. And there's a good chance he's bringing his defensive coordinator, Scott James, over with him because Scott James has been with him since the start at Holy Cross.
Well, Corey Heatherman.
He's put together a really solid Holy Cross defense year in and year out. So Scott James is a name that I'd expect to come with him as Bob Chesney begins to fill up his staff. Do not bring up Corey Heatherman.
No, again. I want you to answer it because there are people who are listening who think that Corey Heatherman is the defensive coordinator. You don't think that he'll be the defensive coordinator.
I do not think Corey Heatherman will be a defensive coordinator for a few reasons. One, he's currently the linebackers coach at Rutgers. He was Curt Cignetti's defensive coordinator at Elon, came with him to James Madison. And then at the start of last season, he left during the offseason to go up to New Brunswick, New Jersey to hang out with Joe Harrisimiak and coach the linebackers. Corey Heatherman makes $1 million. That's Big Ten money. What?
He's not a million. Harrisimiak's $1 million.
No, I'm pretty sure when I Google
Heatherman, linebackers coach.
Google it while I do this.
I think he's at like 300,000 or 400,000, which is I still think that might be more than they can offer.
Please confirm this.
He's at 400,000 per USA Today. He makes 400,000 to coach linebackers.
So the linebackers coach at JMU made less than that. Okay, yeah, Corey. Yes.
But if he was DC, I don't know that they could offer him that salary at JMU, like JMU.
This is really great, really, really good podcasting.
Because I think Brian Haynes was sub 2, and I know I believe they're upping the salary pool for the assistant. I want to say he was like at 189,000. You can verify me if that's correct.
So shout out the Breeze. I'm looking up Looking up the Breeze salary database. Brian Haynes as the defensive coordinator made $189,000. So if let's say he goes up to $250,000 or $300,000, Heatherman most likely will not take a step back in salary pool to get the DC at JMU, a position he once held less than 48 months ago, because he probably has a better shot at getting a P5 coordinator job, which is his end goal, or even a P5 job, or even a head coaching job at the group of 5 level. He has a better chance of doing that as the linebackers coach at Rutgers.
So. He's also tight with Harrisonburg. Like they work together at Maine.
He's not coming.
He could also, it would make a lot of sense for him to follow Harrisonburg when Harrisonburg ultimately gets a head coaching job, which he will again, because he coached
as his DC.
Yes. And would have, so that was the original thing that I think media had floated, was like, oh, Heatherman could come back with Harrisonburg. I don't believe the secret conspiracy that Jeff Bourne flew to Rutgers to be like, Corey, we need you to come back for a pay cut, even though you already did this 2 or 3 years ago. I don't think that happened. So I would agree with you that, I wouldn't anticipate Heatherman coming back.
I forgot what my train of thought was before that, talking about Scott James, the defense, Bob Chesney, great stuff.
You're going through the staff. Who are they bringing in from Holy Cross?
Well, I guess I don't necessarily know who they'll be bringing in fully. I think Scott James, if I was a betting man, which I am, Scott James is coming. He's been with Chesney for a long time. He's been a great defensive coordinator at Holy Cross. You got Dean Kennedy, who just finished his first season as the offensive coordinator for Holy Cross. He was their quarterback coach last year, so he's been on staff for 2 years. Kind of a young guy. He knows the South really well, which might be why he comes. Maybe Chesney really likes what he brings. And I mean, he put together the 3rd best rushing offense in the FCS, 7th best scoring offense in the FCS, and the 4th best total offense in the FCS. So he clearly is good at what he does. Kind of young. Dean Kennedy, I'd put at a 50-50 that he comes with Chesney. Last time I put something 50-50, Cignetti did leave, so who knows what happens. I'll just run through the other coordinators real quick and say how long they've been with them. You got Drew Cavan, who's the special teams tight ends coordinator. He's been there for 6 years. Then they have a ton of guys who've been there for 2 years. So they had some heavy coaching turnover 2 years ago. Kyle Barnes, cornerback coach, 2nd year. Mike Cardova, running back coach, 2nd year as running back coach, 4th year total with Holy Cross. Nick Della Giacono, defensive line. This is a very Italian coaching staff. Nick Della Giacono, defensive line, 2nd year. Anthony DiMichele, safety, 2nd year. Rich Gunnell, wide receiver, pass game coordinator, 2nd year. Brian Vaganek, cornerback coach, 7th year. So he was actually on the staff before Chesney was hired. And Chris Zarkowski, offensive line coach. This was his 1st year. JMU retained Robo, their offensive line coach. Marcus Hall Oliver, their safeties coach. Eddie Whitley Jr., the Rovers. And Jared Holly, the cornerbacks coach. So it'll be interesting.
It will be interesting. I saw somebody in the comments, I think you put it up earlier, had floated Justin Roper, I believe it is, who's now the offensive coordinator at Furman, had also been at Holy Cross, has pretty good background for going back kind of over a decade of leading some really explosive offenses. So he's got more experience than their current offensive coordinator, Kennedy. So maybe something there where Kennedy could even be the quarterback's coach. I don't know exactly how that might go, but something to monitor. Lots of options on the coaching staff. Could also go, if he wanted to, sort of just external from JMU or Holy Cross. My guess is it's a lot of Holy Cross, because
that's typically how it happens. Someone said Heatherman. Nope, that's not it. Justin Roper was the offensive coordinator at Holy Cross with Chesney. He's now at Furman with JMU alum Drew Dudzik.
Good. Yep. Could bring him with you. So that'd be interesting too. And then his strength coach, it's Chris, I think it's Grautsky, has been with them for a while too, and would kind of anticipate that he would come as well.
Yeah. So we'll be anxiously kind of seeing how this staff is filled out. We'll have updates on our Twitter at JMU Sports News. We'll have updates on the website, jmusportsnews.com.